Zimbabwean-born Berita is a multi-award-winning singer. She's also a talented musician, producer, and composer. In today's episode of Speaking from the Heart, this incredible muso lets us into her history, family, work ethic, and passion.
My name is Berita. I am a singer, songwriter, music producer. I do so many things. So I normally call myself a slasher because there's so many things I do. But in the essence, my core is that I'm a musician, but by virtue of that, so I'm a singer, songwriter, guitarist, music producer, and founder of a music rights and talent management company. I was born in Bulawayo, but my father is from Zombe. That's where his people are from. We are Ndebele. My original name, Berita, is my stage name. My original name is Gugulethu Khumalo. Berita is my mother's name. I'm the firstborn, so I know that as soon as my mom had me, she had never had a child before. So apparently she couldn't look after me, which I don't understand, But so she took me to my grandmother, and I'm a grandmother's child. And I think for me, the challenge of being raised by your grandmother, is the fact that you're really spoiled. You are taught, you're treated like an egg. So when I went into the real world, the world is harsh, I've always been very naive. To this day, I've had to teach myself to have a killer instinct. And I'm in an industry that is male-dominated and it really requires you to stand your ground. And it's taken me a long time to do that because I'm a grandmother's child. My grandmother used to plant seedlings and sell them at the market. So I have fond memories of being in the garden with my grandmother, helping her plant seedlings, selling them at the market. I never really used to play outside much. I have fond memories of listening to the radio. I remember very well. I remember being excited on Saturdays for the top 40. So to this day, as a musician, my music playing on radio is a really important thing for me because growing up, I heard all my favorite artists on the radio and that excited me. My grandmother instilled a sense of independence. She never depended on anyone. She always knew how to do things for herself. So my grandmother was unfortunate in such that her husband, my granddad, passed on when she was very young. I think by the time she was 24 years old, she had 4 kids, my mom being the eldest, and her husband passed on. Normally when you are a young widow like that, the father's family, unfortunately, the husband's family takes all the materials, all the material values, the money, the house. So she really had to start afresh. And she gained a sense of independence that to this day, in everything that I do, before I hand it over to somebody else, I need to know how to do it myself because I never want to be in a position where I'm stuck because of somebody else that hasn't delivered. I went to a lot of schools, mainly because my parents were teachers in rural Zombe and my grandmother was in Bulawayo in a more urban setting. So once because I was raised by my grandmother, my early childhood, once I went to grade 1, my parents decided it would be best for me to now be with them. So I went to a very rural Catholic school. And it was we used to walk literally to get to school in the mornings. It's like a 3-4 kilometer walk and 3-4 kilometer walk back. After a year, I think my parents decided that wasn't really healthy. And that's when I moved back to Bulawayo and went to a different school. And then after I got to that school, I was there for 2 years. It was in the hood, basically, Elogishin. And my parents decided, no, they want to take me to more of a Model C a government school. So then I moved to a different school. I was there for 2 years and then my parents decided, no, we want her back. So sadly, I don't have many friends from childhood, from schools, because I was always moving schools so much. But when I think back, I was always a top student. It didn't matter which school I went to. I would have a term of adjusting, and once I've adjusted, I would either be number 1 or number 2 in class. I actually don't remember much creativity in my childhood. I remember creativity in my teenage years, because when I was 16, due to the challenges politically and economically in the Zimbabwean climate, my parents moved, like many Zimbabwean parents, moved overseas to New Zealand, and they took us with. And for the first time there, I was in a different environment to the one that I'd grown up in, and I started to explore creativity. I started writing, I started painting, and then eventually, discovered my love for music fully and started writing songs and singing and exploring playing instruments. My high school experience was also filled with changes, because when I first went into high school, there was a school called John Talak. A lot of the really intelligent students go there, and I was admitted to the school, which made my parents very happy. So I went to boarding school for 1.5 years. Whilst in boarding school, my dad moved to a college that was like a private college. You get basically more of a world-class type education that had access to other experiences, extramural activities that can form, someone, as opposed to a boarding school where you get really grounded, but you really boxed in. So I then moved from boarding to a girls' school. Mind you, I came to the school and all of a sudden I'm the girl from the Bundus. I'm basically not at the top of the food chain when I moved to that school. And I think I'd always been accustomed to being number 1 or number 2 in the class because I was such a bookworm. But all of a sudden, I needed to be cool. I needed to make friends, and it was just too confusing for me. So those were not the best days of school. I think that's when I experienced bullying for the first time. I'd never experienced bullying until that point, and it really terrified me. My last year of schooling, high school in Zimbabwe, my dad and my mom decided that they now needed to save money for us to move overseas. So they would no longer afford to take us to this expensive private school. So now we went to a private school, but in the hood. That was like a totally different experience. All of a sudden, I'm, so to say, bad and bougie, because now I have all this experience from this expensive private school. I, moved to this new school. All of a sudden, I am, the girl that everyone wants to be friends with. I'm popular, I'm smart, and I was really having the best time of my life.
Coming up next, Berita reveals her biggest critic.
And she was a better singer than me. To this day, by far. She only started liking my music on my 3rd album. She's a critic. I had to then move to New Zealand. Get there, I'm the only African black student in the class. First day of school, everyone's touching my afro. I, all of a sudden, have gone from being the popular, most revered girl in my teenage years, which we all know when you're a teenager, that's what you want, to being someone that no one wants to be friends with. Someone that has to culturally and historically explain who they are. Someone that has to catch up to this new environment, new world. And also that was difficult. That was probably the most difficult experience that I experienced as a teenager. But again, that gave birth to, the creative side of me, because then I had to find solace in music and art and fashion. When I was 17, my sister was diagnosed with bipolar. And she was a better singer than me. To this day, by far. She only started liking my music on my 3rd album. She's a critic. She critiques my singing and my writing and everything, because she had the natural gift and talent for music. And I remember thinking that me and my sister were going to be a singing duo. We would always sing together, and she'd always chicken me a bit because, she always had her harmonies on point. And then she was diagnosed with bipolar. She was also struggling in school, the same that I was. Like, she was struggling to really fit into the school environment, and remember, like, this is my second time experiencing bullying, but this time it's subtle. Like, when it was like subtle racism and bullying. So I think she struggled with it a little bit more than I did. So then she fell mentally ill. And then that's when I almost like could feel myself going down that path, because I was really disappointed and heartbroken. And like, I could see that I was losing interest for everything else. But what really saved me was the fact that I couldn't go through the same pain that I was watching my sister go through. And music, that's where music really came in. And I started to spend a lot of time creating this musical world for myself. And I kept it secret. Every time that I was singing or writing songs, I would just close my door. They knew I had a guitar, but no one ever really listened to me, until this one day my mom was like, you know what, I want to hear you. And I remember singing Jill Scott, He Loves Me. He loves me, na na na, na 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 na. I sang that, and at the time I just picked up guitar, so I would strum one thing. He loves me, da da da. And my mom was like, wow, you're really good. And I think that was the first person to really acknowledge, that I could do this. And that was liberating for me. And I think I love my mom so much more for that moment. And I began to see her as someone that, was more than just a parent, someone that really looked out for my inner interests. I mentioned it once to my parents that I was interested in pursuing. First, it was, I think, fashion. I wanted to be a couturier. I wanted to be a fashion designer, which is interesting because, like, now I don't really spend much time on fashion. I let, like, my stylist and manager guide me in that, direction, because I really, love music. And also my sense of fashion is different. I think, the fashion that I see now on the gram is really about being, so to say, a slay queen, there's nothing wrong with that. But my sense of fashion was very grounded and rooted and very artistic, I think if I'd gone that route, I would have been like, I would say maybe an African Lady Gaga. But again, like, you can see how I dress. I'm very, ladylike and laid back. So I started, fashion designing, taking fashion. Unfortunately, I couldn't take music in high school. So, I studied fashion design and costuming. So my parents were not too sure about that. We were living overseas. What's expected for you is to be a nurse or a doctor, or my parents are farmers in New Zealand. You needed to really take a route where they would go to the skills shortages list, immigration skills shortages list, and check if that thing that you want to study or want to be is in there. If it's not in there, you're talking a very foreign language to them. They don't want to hear it. So I said it once, and my mom checked the skills list and decided, But mind you, she had said I sing well. So from there, I knew that I needed to disguise. So I then I remember I had to come back to Africa and study because of, like, visa issues. So, and I found a place in the Eastern Cape, South Africa. So I picked an accounting course. I knew that I was really good with numbers and really good with math. I hadn't studied accounting in high school, but I knew that would come easy to me, and that would also satisfy my parents, So I now then chose that, and secretly, I came to South Africa to pursue music. What excites me is the fact that I'm coming to understand who I am. I think my early 20s were traumatic. I think when you leave school, you don't know what's in store for you. And for me, by the time that I left school, I already was, a professional musician. So I released my first album when I was a second-year student, and by the time I was a third-year student, I, had won my first award. And mind you, this is me moving to South Africa within a year, really recording an album and having that album become a success. So I hadn't really adjusted to South African culture, and when I left school, I didn't fully adjust into, now I'm in the real world, and now I have to figure out how to function, and that took me time, it took me years. And for the first time in my life, I feel very balanced. I wake up every morning and I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I know that I'm many parts because I play so many roles in the world. I need to first be of service to myself. So I have time in the morning where no one can get a hold of me because I need to do yoga, I need to meditate, I need to pray, I need to take care of myself. And I have time where I need to now take care of growing musically, humbling myself to my craft and my creativity, where you find me doing like the solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, things that you would think, but you've been making music, you've won awards, why do you still warm up your voice in the morning or learn how to play scales? But because I also have to, be of service to my craft, and then I then go into the real world and I'm of service to my company and, people that love me and people that I love. But I think I'm in a place that I've always wanted to be in, where I really find balance in who I am.
More with Berita as she talks about working with her musical icons.
The only song that has both of them on that ever came out is my collaboration. I moved to South Africa, start studying. Mind you, I graduated top of my class with cum laude, because like I say, maths and numbers has always been not too difficult for me. But I started to then perform. I started to do soul sessions. So every Thursday I would go perform, at the local center where there was like a drama club that did, performance arts. So I came to Joburg for the first time. And the first time I came to Joburg, I decided that the city was too big. I needed to make it before I get here. That became my mission. You gotta make it before you get to Joburg. I then had family here. My uncle heard me singing and playing and said, and really had nice words to say about, what I was doing, and said, I actually know someone that works at a radio station. Let me get them to listen to you. So then Ndate Flesh comes to listen to me. He also thinks that I sing really well, and then takes me to this radio station. I sing. I started singing because I'm a singer-songwriter by writing my own songs. So I don't really have a repertoire of other people's songs for people to judge me on. So I think from day one, I was really judged on my sincerity as a singer and a songwriter. So I performed these songs of mine on radio, on Alex FM in Alexandra, and people call in and say, oh, tula kamnandi sana, oh, benaha monati, all these comments. And then the radio DJ who brought me to the station gets excited and says, I actually know a record label. Can I take you there and see if they would be interested? And then that's how I get signed to my first deal. So my parents don't know anything about this. I record the album, they don't know anything about it. Once it's time to release the album, they say, Yazi, your name is too popular. Gugulethu sounds like a gospel singer. So can you please find a name that will be your stage name, that will separate your day-to-day being from your stage life, And then I can't think of a name. The only name that was unique that I could think of was my mom's name, Berita, because I don't know anyone that has this name. So I go back to them and say, actually, I would like to use my mom's name, And then they're like, what's your mom's name? Berita. They're like, okay, that can work. And then I release the music. The first CD that I give to my uncle without my knowledge, he sends it to New Zealand. And then I get a call from my mom. My mom is like, wow, so I'm a singer now, eh? And then luckily the music was really good. My mom fell in love with Thando just as South Africa did as well. And she said, I had all her blessings. And from then, my parents have been really supportive of my music, but they really didn't have another choice. On my website, I do have like under my biography, I've got like highlights, and there's a whole list of awards and, you know, stuff that I've been able to accomplish, you know, that puts me in a position of leverage in the music industry and as an artist. But for me, the moments that have really stood out the most was, number one, spending time with Baba Oliver Mtukudzi and Hugh Masekela. I recorded a song with them in 2014 called Mwana wa Mai, which first of all, when Baba Oliver Mtukudzi, Hugh passed on first, they were working on a joint album. They never finished it. The only song that has both of them on that ever came out is my collaboration. Having spent time watching them, talking to them, I think the reason why I continue to make music and I continue to enjoy myself is because of the time that I spent with Hugh and Oliver, because I had like a century, like 100 years of knowledge, of music industry knowledge, you know, just in one setting. So I think that I can like talk the whole day about, you know, the principles that they taught me. Like, for example, with Hugh taught me that every day I need to spend an hour on my craft. And I do that. Over the years, I never used to, but now I do it without fail. It's called a no exceptions policy for me. And then Baba Oliver Mtukudzi taught me that there's always something to sing about. You know, as an African, we sing when we are in a funeral, in weddings, when we're happy, when we are sad, when it's raining. We have a song for everything. So he used to release music every year because he believed that there was something to sing about. And that's why I've now come to work consistently, because of what Baba Oliver Mtukudzi taught me. You know what's interesting is that Hugh took me to a concert once. Tony Braxton and Babyface were in town, and he was Babyface's friend. So he called me and said, "What are you doing on Saturday?" And I was like, "I'm home." He's like, "Can I take you to your concert?" I was like, "Sure." You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, Hugh Masekela, first of all, was very naughty. You must understand. If you've read his book, Grazing in the Grass, he was very naughty. We got there, and because he was Babyface's friend, we went to backstage and we hung out in Babyface's dressing room with Babyface. And I have a picture with Hugh and Babyface. I had written down goals and I realized my goals were not big enough. And now I'm like rethinking what goals, you know. One key goal that I have is to win a Grammy. That's one thing that I'm working towards, you know. But now it's to get into studio with Babyface. Imagine that, after having met Babyface through Hugh Masekela. That's like the craziest thing, because like meeting Babyface is literally like is like connecting with Michael Jackson and Prince, you know, and all the greatest, you know, singers and musicians and writers of our time. So it's crazy to know that like my Grammy is like literally one people away. Like I met Hugh, who introduced me to Babyface, who makes Grammy Award winning work. South Africa is not wrong to claim me. Honestly, musically, I've always been honest. I've always just been honest to Zimbabwe and said, I'm Zimbabwean. I'm from Zimbabwe, you know. Nyakhuluma ndinotaura. I speak both the languages that are the key languages in Zim. I humble myself to my home country, the resilience and perseverance, the character. In terms of the person that I am, my character is because of where I come from, you know. But musically, it's South Africa. You know, I started my career in the Eastern Cape, and it's because of the support that I received in the Eastern Cape that I've come to be who I am today. Over the years, I've watched what's happened in Zimbabwe. As someone that left Zimbabwe when I was 16 years old, ever since I was 16, I've never been in my home country for more than 10 days. I go home often, but never for extended periods of time. And I have so much feelings gobbled up, if there's such a word in English. Like, I have so many feelings about my country, you know, and where it needs to go in the future. And I believe that, like, it's something that I need to put in a body of work. It's not something that I can talk about. Growing up, I was taught never to really express myself on politics and religion. As the young ones that are coming out of Zimbabwe now, we have to be politically emancipated. We have to be able to say our minds, you know, speak our mind. And that's what I hope to really do in my music, in a project, and really unpack my Zimbabwean heritage and what it means for me.
Join the conversation on our Facebook page @Thando Channel and let us know what resonated the most with you on this episode of Speaking from the Heart.